Hi guys, great to see all of you here today. Just a few words about me. So my name is Oleksii, I'm a Magento 2 architect. So I'm working for Magento for the last 6 years. So this was a great time to join Magento 6 years ago, because at that time we started actual development of Magento 2 platform. And at this time, we implemented like as a base features, ground rules, and vision of Magento 2, and all designs and approaches that we have right now were established at that time. So we was working on development of Magento 2 for years. So I would say approximately 4 years we spent of development, and finally we was ready for actual release publication. So on this photo, you can see like a tweet post from Ted Peterzak. He was a vice president of technology of Magento 2. And on this photo, we're about 25 minutes of publishing first Magento 2 release. So you can see here, actually, Oleksii Korshenko, he was director of Magento 2 at the time, our lead architect, Anton Krill, the dev manager, and QA manager, actually VP of technology. And actually, yeah, we are ready to do this publication. And the question is, how many managers do you need for one developer to publish Magento 2 release? Yes, the correct answer will be 5. So 5 managers, 1 developer, and actually Magento 2 release is ready. So very simple. Yeah. And actually, in 10 minutes, we were celebrating. We had a great party. We finally published this release. Everyone excited about this. I mean, we as a core team, as Magento team, and as well as you as a community. So this was a very important release for all of us, and e-commerce probably in general. Exciting time, and a great time to be there at that time. Okay, what happens next? So after that, we already published a lot of additional patch releases, and we published some minor releases, some patch releases, and etc. So we did a lot of work on that. And I just want to highlight that we did some minor release, which was 2.1.0, and we are about to publish 2.2, which is also minor release. And important thing there from the backward compatibility perspective that patch releases should not affect you a lot and should not invalidate a lot your extensions that you're developing for Magento 2. But minor releases a little bit more complex and may invalidate more things for you. That's why today I'm going to talk with you about the versioning and about the backward compatibility policy and how to improve the stability of your extensions in order to avoid false positive invalidations of your extensions and make them more stable with upcoming Magento releases. So let's discuss the platform version versus modelless version. So first of all, we have a platform version. The first number in these versions is 2, which is actually Magento 2. And we have a minor and patch version in the platform. Actually, platform version just defines the scope of this release, whether it's functional release, means actually minor, or whether it's bug fixes release, which is patch. At the same time, model version just consists of 3 numbers, which is major, minor, and patch. And actually, it represents the changes that were actually done for this particular component and for this particular module. That means that in scope of patch platform releases, we as a Magento 2 are promising you that we will change only patch version of the modulus. But at the same time, if we do minor release, which is functional release, we can trigger major or minor changes. That's why minor version of the platform may invalidate more third-party extensions and may affect you more and invalidate your extensions. That's what we have. And unfortunately, there are some exceptional cases when we increase minor version of the model in scope of platform patch release. And we had it once. So in Magento 2.1.3, for instance, model vault was bumped from 100.1.1 to 100.2.0, means in scope of platform patch release, we changed the minor version of the component honestly, that's a violation of our own rules. But unfortunately, that was required. We did a change in the public API of that model. Actually, we added new method there, and by our own rules, it says we must publish this, bump this minor version of the component. Luckily, as you saw, we already published more than actually 20 patch releases, minor releases, and we did this only once. So we are not doing this very on the every patch release or very frequently. But anyway, one time that's happened. What we usually do in these such cases, we are trying to talk to you and communicate these changes with you in advance. For instance, before 2.1.3 release publication, we did these posts, announcements, and etc. That, hey guys, we did this change for this particular model. That's a violation of our rules, but be informed and be ready for this change. So there is a simple table that just shows the strategy of our versioning on the components level. So at some point in time, we decided that models version we will start from 100.0.0. So by this, we would like to stress the difference between platform version and modelers version. And as you can see, for instance, for release even 2.0.12, we still have 100.0 something. So only patch version of the models was changed for these patch releases. Some models, for instance, catalog, we do a lot of bug fixes and improvements there. That's why these models, I would say, is changing in scope of almost every patch release. But some models, for instance, CMS, just we have less fixes there, it is more stable. But when we do minor release, which is 2.1.0, as you can see, some models were bumped on the minor level, such as catalog, customer, sales. But for instance, But for instance, catalog and CMS models, we changed the major version of these models. Means we did some significant changes there in the public code. That's why it was a requirement for us to bump major version and actually invalidate some extensions which has a dependency on these components. The good news about that after 2.1.0 we did several patch releases, and in scope of patch releases we changed all the patch version of these models. But minor releases are just more serious for you from the compatibility perspective. So the code. Let's talk about this part. So as you may know, actually definitely you know, that Magento 2 actually is the PHP framework. And we have a lot of code there, just a PHP code, XML, database, whatever. Unfortunately, I have enough time to explain everything on different parts of the system, but I would like to talk with you about some of the most commonly used parts of our code. I believe most of you had experience with Magento 1, but my question is, how many of you are installed at least once Magento 2.0? Please raise your hand. Okay, not bad. And who already upgraded your instance to Magento 2.1? Okay, not bad. But I believe everyone has experience with Magento 1, and there is one big difference between Magento 2 and Magento 1 from the code perspective. So I would say in Magento 1, all code actually is almost public. And this platform was designed for extending, and you can touch any part of the system. At the same time, it doesn't say in which time and which code was changed and how to inform you and validate your extension and to say, hey, we did this change, and right now you are broken. So in Magento 2, what we are trying to do, we are saying that Magento 2 code base consists of two parts, the private code and the public code. So the private code, first of all, it is not supposed to be used by third-party models, by third-party extensions. Means we implemented this code, we have this code for us, we're using it for our internal needs, but you shouldn't modify this code or touch it or extend or whatever. And modifications in the private code will trigger only patch version of the component. Yes, we do understand that potentially some significant changes even in the private code may affect your extensions. That's why we're saying if we'll do significant changes there, super significant changes, in these cases we will trigger minor or major version of the component. But again, so you cannot rely on that. But for you, we're given the promise on the public code. And actually, what is the public code? Public is just our code which is marked with annotation at API. So in this code, you can use to build your own customization, extensions, and etc. So actually, public code consists of like a public API, which is application programming interface, and public customization points. And actually, changes in the public part of our code will trigger minor or major version of the model. So about the PHP code itself. So PHP classes and interfaces. There is just a simple rules how you should depend on our code. For instance, you need to declare dependency on the major version of our component in case when you are just injecting our API classes in the constructor or just calling some methods from them. Or if you're just configuring preferences in DI or configuring constructor arguments and etc. So also you can just pluginize our API code. And actually, that's a pretty powerful feature in Magento 2, this pluginization and interception, and it allows you actually to modify all behavior in our system. But we are saying that despite this code is public, we are not allowing to extend it. And we have just exceptional case with abstract classes. So yesterday, Maxi Katrinko was talking about that extension of extending of our classes, even the API is prohibited. Actually, that's true. And unfortunately, we have some layer supertypes like an abstract action controller, block, or abstract model, something like that. And I would say that's a legacy. That's a legacy code that we are going to refactor in the future and eliminate this like a layer supertypes, which requires you to extend them. But as for today, we are saying that do not extend our API code. Only in case if this class is abstract, only in case if it is marked as API, you can extend it and rely on it. There is no other cases when you should do that. There are a lot of other techniques and practices how you can avoid extending and modify the behavior and do subtyping and etc. But do not do that. And for the minor version, for instance, you should depend on the minor version if you do implementation of our API interfaces, or you just redefining some preferences if you would like to substitute this interface through entire system. So in which cases we will invalidate you. For instance, if we'll decide to remove some our API classes, interfaces, or methods from these interfaces, yes, that will be significant change. And in these cases, we will bump the major version of this component, means all extensions which depends on this, for instance, catalog, will be invalidated. But we understand that this is a significant change which will trigger a lot of invalidations. That's why we are trying to do our best and avoid this and never remove such things. On the other hand, for instance, if we will decide to add new API classes, add new methods to interface and etc., means these changes won't affect the customers, which depends on the major version of the component. So who cares? Actually, the interface had 5 methods, then we added one more, the 6th one. So it won't be affected. But in case you decided to implement this interface, definitely this will be a fatal error for you, and your actual application will fail. That's why in these cases we will trigger the minor version of that component. But everyone else who depends on the major version will be in good shape, so they won't be affected by that. And there are just a few notes about other parts of our system, just events. So events, they are very popular in Magento 1. In Magento 2, we have these plugins which gives you much more opportunities, but we still have this functionality in Magento 2. And actually, the API of this feature is actually event itself and its arguments. That's why we are saying that if you are using our events, so you just subscribe it on these events, you can depend on the major version. We are saying this is a pretty stable part of our platform. And in case if we'll decide to remove this event or just remove some arguments from this event, only in this case we will invalidate this component and bump the major version. But we already got some requests from the community and just your feedbacks. And when the community asks us, please never ever remove events from the system. You're implementing your extension, you're doing your customizations, and if you actually rely on this, strongly. That's why we're trying to keep our events list at the same state. Also, so it is a very popular thing to implement additional customizations for the themes, implement new themes, or just modify existing UIs. That's why we're talking about the layout handles declared by modelers. So if you're just declaring new block instance in the layout or just removing some blocks or container, so that's okay. That's our API, and that's a major dependency on our component. Means your extension or new theme won't be invalidated in patch releases for sure, and most likely won't be invalidated even for minor releases. So you can implement this extension once and use it for multiple Magento releases. So you can save your time, you can save your development hours on that. So about the invalidation, so only if we'll decide to remove or rename some containers or remove some layout handle, yes, we will invalidate this model. But if we'll add new functionality there, for instance, new layout handles, new blocks, containers, some additional stuff, we'll bump minor version, but this won't invalidate you if you have a dependency on major. Yes, we'll inform you that we added some new functionality, some new features there. That's a minor thing, but you won't be invalidated, and actually that's good for you. And XML configuration, yeah, that's a pretty big part of even of Magento 2 and Magento 1 as well. And as for today, as far as I remember, we have about 60 or 70 different configuration types, XML configuration types in Magento. And the API of this component actually is schema, actually our XSD, and actually the type itself. So if you just providing additional configuration to some configuration type, for instance, you're declaring your DI.XML file and just putting some additional configurations there, or you subscribing on events and etc., so that's okay. That's a major dependency, you're in good shape. But if you decided to customize this part, for instance, today we had a talk from Eugene Chakusarov about message queue and about the synchronous, asynchronous stuff, but that's enterprise feature. For instance, in the community, we have events, and at some point of time, you may decide, I would like to mark some events as synchronous and some events as asynchronous. So how you can do that? You can just simply modify XSD of existing XSD for the events, and just add this optional note attribute. So, and actually implement some background sync for that. So in this case, you need to extend our XSD. Means in such cases, you need to declare dependency on the minor version. Potentially, why it is minor? Because if we as a core team will decide to add some functionality there, and we can declare the same attribute and or node with the same name, potentially we may have a conflict. That's why we are saying that if we're adding new thing like an attribute or nodes to the existing schema, we'll bump the minor version and invalidate your extension. But major version will be bumped only if we will decide totally remove this configuration type. For instance, we are not supporting events anymore. Definitely that will be a framework change, significant framework change, and this will be a major version bump. Or if we'll, for instance, decide to add some required nodes or attributes to the existing configuration type, means all configurations in the system potentially can be invalidated. But I don't think that we will do this right now. So pretty significant changes, and we are trying to avoid this. And the last part on this is actually system configuration. That's also a pretty big part of our platform. You can configure your Magento instance via UI, and actually the API of this part is actually config passes. They configure it in the XML, and we are saving this information in the database. That's why that's our API. And if you just pull in this configuration and just reading this configuration or just declare a new one just for your extension, that's okay. That's a major dependency. You are pretty stable. And we will invalidate you only in case we'll decide to drop some part of this configuration. In this case, yes, we will inform you that there is no, for instance, base URL for store anymore for some reason. In this case, we will just trigger major version of the platform. So just summarizing, so model dependency rules. So first of all, you know that Magento 2 uses Composer for managing their dependency. That's why we are saying that if your extension has dependency on some core components, you should declare all this dependency in the Composer JSON file in the require section. And never declare the dependency on our meta packages, like a product community edition or product enterprise edition, because in this case, for instance, on every patch release, you will be invalidated. So this is not good for you. That's why I just declare this concrete dependency, for instance, on the catalog, on the checkout, on whatever you need, and with a meaningful dependency version, major or minor. If you decided to use our private code, in this case, you need to declare dependency even on our patch version of that component. And actually, that means that potentially you will be invalidated very frequently. We are doing patch releases every 2, 3, 4 weeks. Means the life cycle of your extension can be less than 1 month. So this is not good for you. That's why try do not use our private code. But if you decided to use it, make sure that you have patch dependency, because potentially you will be invalidated by our code very soon. And actually deprecation. What we are doing with our code, and to let you know that some part of our system is deprecated and when it will be removed. So the rule is pretty simple, actually. If we decided to deprecate some part of our code, we're just saying that it is deprecated, and we are adding this since some particular release number, like it's shown on this example. And also we are trying to add this C annotation, and by this we are trying to suggest you which implementation you should use instead. So what kind of new implementation should be used. Actually pretty simple, should be readable and clear, and the important things here that this deprecated code will be removed in the next minor release. So we're giving you some room, some time to adjust your code and avoid using of deprecated code, because once we'll do 2.1.2 or 2.13, sorry, 2.2 or 2.3, this code will be removed for you. That's why just be ready for that. And just some simple use cases. For instance, if we need to remove some interface and class, we have internal rules inside our organization that says never do that. If you need to remove the class, mark it as a deprecated, mark every method of this class or interface as a deprecated, suggest new implementation, and actually that's it. And in the next minor release, we will do this removal, but not right now. The same for the public and protected methods removal. So we're just marking them with a deprecated annotation. But the important thing there that we are saying, do not use private code, but at the same time we understand that you use your code, that you are using our private code. And we are trying to keep backward compatibility. For sure, we are promising this on the API level, but we are trying to do our best and keep backward compatibility even on the private part of our code. So if we even mark some method as deprecated, we are trying to keep the functionality of this method and actually the return types and the logical values from it the same as it was before. Definitely, if this is not just a supercritical bug, it will return the same result. If this was a bug, yeah, potentially the result will be different. In Magento 2, we are using, as you know, dependency injection, and we are inject all our dependency directly in constructor. And actually, honestly, that's a cool thing. It's very important, cool things for the project, but at the same time, this is a huge headache for all of us, I mean, as a core team. Every time we are doing refactoring, when we are doing bug fixes, we need to inject some new dependencies to the class, or even remove some outdated dependency. So for instance, we did refactoring of the class, and right now we are able to remove 5 dependencies from the constructor. The rule says, do not remove them. First of all, mark them as a deprecated, and actually that's it, they will be removed later. But if you need to add new dependency, actually we found a way, like a workaround for this, and how it works. So if you need to add new dependency to the constructor, first of all, you should add it at the very end of the argument list of the constructor and make it optional. It doesn't mean that these arguments won't be provided for you. We just did this trick inside the constructor body. So if the value was provided, we are using this value. Otherwise, we are pulling this dependency directly from object manager, and means once constructor is done, all dependency will be initialized for you. And same rule for public and protected property. So we are not removing them, we're just marking them as deprecated, and we are trying to preserve the same functionality for this variable. So if this controller persists the session, customer session in some private property or protected property, even if it is deprecated, we will keep the session for you there. For instance, you can extend it, you can rely on this implementation, and we are trying to do our best and keep this compatibility on that level as well. Actually, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free.
Hi, Oleksii. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. I will be honest with you. I'm using private code in my modules. The question is, so for instance, every module I write, I need to render some configuration in source configuration, and I'm relying on existing blocks. What would be your recommendation for me to write in composer.json? Should I also mention patch version of the, I don't know, module backend, and like it will be like major, minor, and patch version specified, or I should still use major and minor, and for patch I will say star? Thank you.
So the question is, why you decided to use private code? Which part of the private code do you use? Can you repeat, please?
Blocks for admin panel to render.
Okay, got it. Yes, good question. Thank you. Yes, that's true. We are asking that use our public code. And unfortunately, in 2.1 and even 2.0, we have enough coverage by API. So we understand that, and we are trying to fix and address this issue. And right now, honestly, actually, exactly today and several months before, we started work on improving the coverage of the API in our code base. And I hope that in release 2.2, I hope it will be soon, we significantly increase the coverage by the API annotations. And about the blocks, yes, blocks will be API. That's our vision for today, and I hope it will be released, this vision. So means the block will become a public, means in this case, if it is public, you should not depend on, if you can avoid dependency on the patch. So major or minor, it depends on how you will implement the code. Yes, we will address this issue for you.
Thank you.
A question?
Hi.
Hey.
There are cases in code base, in the actual code base of Magento 2, which deprecated stuff is not hinted with the alternative solution for that deprecated stuff. For example, the abstract payment method.
Yes, you're right. Unfortunately, we still have some deprecated code, and even I would say it is not marked yet with the since annotation, starting from which release, and there is some gaps where there is a missed part of the suggested code. Yes, you're right. So for the since annotation, we'll probably add it as well in 2.2. This will be done. And we are reviewing all deprecated code right now and just addressing these issues, just missing information, and yeah, but that's in develop branch right now.
Okay, thank you.
So after upgrade to the 2, I believe this will be addressed.
Okay.
A question? Hi, my name is Ivan, and I also use private code. So the question is, do you have any kind of a tool that will tell other community developers where they actually use private code versus API code, apart from PHP Storm plugin?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Ivan. You can ask the same question on our architecture console. And the answer is, unfortunately, no, we don't have it right now. We had these discussions, we have these requests, and I don't see probably public PRs for that yet, but at least we have these requests and discussions about implementing this tool, and just to let you know, to analyze your extension and say where you are with the dependency and deprecated stuff.